JRPGs have been around for decades, and few genres have evolved as dramatically over time. From the pixelated beginnings of Final Fantasy to today's massive cinematic adventures, the genre has constantly reinvented itself while holding on to the things fans love most: colorful worlds, unforgettable characters, huge emotional stories, and combat systems that blend strategy with spectacle. And that formula works for a reason. But traditionally, JRPGs have also been very structured. No matter how big the world feels, many of these games still guide players down a fairly linear path, moving from one story beat, cutscene, and major objective to the next. Even action-focused JRPGs often keep players tightly locked into the intended experience. Epic? Absolutely. Open-ended? Not always. But over the years, that started to change. More developers have begun embracing freedom, building JRPGs with larger worlds, more flexible progression systems, deeper customization, and combat that encourages experimentation instead of rigid playstyles. The result is a new wave of action JRPGs that still capture the heart of the genre, while giving players far more control over how they explore, fight, and shape their adventure. And honestly, some of the genre's most exciting games are coming from that shift. Number 7. Resonance of Fate. Freewheeling combat and missions. Even though it's one of the more linear games on this list, Resonance of Fate still stands out as one of the most unique and overlooked action JRPGs of its era. Originally released on the Xbox 360 and a handful of other platforms, this cult classic blends Western-style RPG ideas with flashy anime-inspired action, all wrapped in a gritty steampunk world that feels unlike almost anything else in the genre. And then there's the combat. The game's tri-attack battle system is absolutely wild. It mixes turn-based strategy with real-time gunplay, letting players pause, plan their movements, line up attacks, and then unleash these stylish acrobatic shootouts that feel more like an action movie than a traditional JRPG battle. It's tactical, but fast. Complex, but incredibly satisfying once it clicks. Every encounter becomes this balancing act of positioning, timing, and chaining together attacks while bullets, explosions, and slow-motion flips fill the screen. And because the combat is so open and expressive, players constantly feel like they're improvising their own stylish solutions rather than simply selecting commands from a menu. Combined with its rewarding missions, deep customization, and distinct steampunk atmosphere, Resonance of Fate delivers an experience that genuinely makes players feel like futuristic bounty hunters fighting for survival in a crumbling mechanical world. It may not get talked about as often as other JRPGs from that generation. But for fans looking for something different, it's still a hidden gem worth discovering. Number 6. Dragon's Dogma 2. Eastern Elder Scrolls meets Game of Thrones. If there's any Japanese action RPG that truly feels comparable to the Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, it's Dragon's Dogma 2. Much like its predecessor, the game drops players into a massive fantasy world and simply lets them loose. As the mysterious Arisen, players journey across dangerous kingdoms in pursuit of a legendary dragon, traveling through dense forests, dark caverns, war-torn roads, and monster-infested wilderness that feels genuinely unpredictable. And the world constantly pushes back. Massive creatures roam the landscape. Rival factions clash across the map. Random encounters can spiral into full-blown disasters in seconds. That sense of adventure is what makes Dragon's Dogma 2 stand out. And then there's the vocation system. Instead of locking players into rigid classes, the game encourages experimentation through branching combat styles that evolve over time. Whether players prefer massive swords, magic, archery, or hybrid builds, each vocation dramatically changes how combat feels. Backing players up are the game's iconic pawns, AI companions that fight alongside you, learn from experience, and help create the chaotic, unpredictable battles the series is known for. And in the sequel, everything feels bigger. New and expanded vocations. More dynamic combat options. And a world map that dwarfs the original game's scale. The result is an action RPG that captures the same sense of freedom and discovery that made games like Skyrim so addictive, while still feeling completely unique in its own way. It's ambitious, messy at times, and surprisingly overlooked for how much freedom it gives the player. Number 5. Tales of Arise. A new style of Tales arises. For years, the Tales series built its identity around colorful worlds, anime-inspired storytelling, and lightning-fast combat that felt almost closer to a fighting game than a traditional RPG. Then Tales of Arise came along and changed the formula. The bright, whimsical tone of earlier entries gives way to something darker and more grounded. The world feels larger, harsher, and more cinematic, closer in atmosphere to modern Western RPGs than the classic Tales formula fans were used to. And honestly, it works surprisingly well. The game embraces a more open and free-roaming structure, giving players greater freedom to explore at their own pace instead of constantly funneling them from one story beat to the next. That added sense of scale makes the adventure feel much more personal. But even with those changes, Tales of Arise never fully abandons what made the series special. The anime-style storytelling is still front and center. The character interactions still have that classic charm. And the iconic, linear motion battle system remains one of the game's biggest strengths. Combat is fluid, flashy, and aggressive, rewarding quick reactions, combo chains, and coordinated attacks between party members in battles that constantly feel exciting. So while Tales of Arise pushes the series in a bolder, more modern direction, it still manages to preserve the heart of what longtime fans loved in the first place. It's a JRPG that feels bigger, freer, and more ambitious, without losing its identity along the way. Number 4. Star Ocean 3, Till the End of Time, Director's Cut. Much to manage and overcome in this sci-fi epic. Long before branching choices and player-driven narratives became standard RPG features, the Star Ocean series was already experimenting with them. Back in the 90s, Tri-Ace and Square Enix quietly built a cult following by creating RPGs where character relationships, story paths, and even party dynamics could shift depending on player actions and choices. And for many fans, Star Ocean, Till the End of Time is where the series truly peaked. At first glance, it looks like a fairly traditional sci-fi fantasy RPG. But once combat starts, the game becomes something entirely different. Battles are fast, chaotic, and surprisingly technical, blending real-time action with tactical decision-making in a way that constantly forces players to stay engaged. Positioning matters. Timing matters. Managing your party matters. There's always something happening. And while the combat system can feel overwhelming at first, especially for newcomers, that complexity is also what makes it so rewarding once everything clicks into place. Outside of battle, the game throws players across massive sci-fi worlds filled with colorful cities, strange alien environments, and a scale that almost feels inspired by Star Wars at times. It's ambitious, dense, and unapologetically layered. Even after the more refined director's cut, Till the End of Time still isn't the most beginner-friendly RPG out there. But for players willing to learn its systems and embrace its many moving parts, it offers one of the deepest and most satisfying action JRPG experiences of its generation.
Make sure if you're enjoying our list to hit that like button and of course subscribe for future content.
Number 3. Phantasy Star Online 2, New Genesis. A new, dynamic era of Phantasy Star. Few RPG franchises have evolved as dramatically as Phantasy Star. What started back on the Sega Master System eventually transformed into one of the most ambitious online action RPG experiences on consoles, and Phantasy Star Online 2 is where that evolution really exploded. The original Phantasy Star Online was already ahead of its time in the early 2000s, bringing a quasi-MMO structure to consoles long before that became common. But this sequel takes that idea and pushes it to another level entirely. The scale is massive. Players are given an overwhelming amount of freedom when it comes to character builds, classes, weapons, cosmetics, progression paths, and combat styles. There's always another upgrade to chase, another mission to tackle, or another loadout to experiment with. And the game's interface reflects that depth. Menus, hotkeys, abilities, commands, it's dense, but intentionally so. Once players settle into the rhythm, the game starts to feel less like a traditional console RPG and more like a full-blown MMO experience. Honestly, there are moments where it feels closer to World of Warcraft than most action RPGs on consoles ever dared to be. Traversal also adds to that sense of freedom. Photon dash and glide abilities make movement across the game's huge environments feel fluid and fast, helping players weave seamlessly between exploration and combat. And that combat absolutely delivers. Fast-paced, flashy, and packed with effects, battles constantly reward movement, teamwork, and quick reactions while still leaving plenty of room for experimentation. What's especially impressive is how far the customization extends beyond gameplay itself. Even small social features, like uploadable symbol art used for communication, help give the game personality and make the online world feel alive. It's chaotic, detailed, and sometimes overwhelming. But for players willing to dive into its systems, Phantasy Star Online 2 offers one of the deepest and most flexible action JRPG sandboxes around. Number 2. Legend of Mana. A non-linear legend that's been forgotten by many. Following the success of Secret of Mana, the series took a bold turn with Legend of Mana, and the result was one of the strangest, most creative action JRPGs of its era. At its core, the game still delivers the fast-paced, Zelda-inspired combat the series was known for. Battles are colorful, chaotic, and surprisingly flexible, giving players plenty of freedom in how they approach fights, chain attacks, and build strategies on the fly. But what really makes Legend of Mana stand out is its completely unique world structure. Instead of exploring a traditional map, players literally build the world themselves through the game's land-make system. You start with an empty grid. Then, by collecting magical artifacts, you place towns, dungeons, forests, and landmarks wherever you want, slowly shaping your own version of the world as the adventure unfolds. It's part choose your own adventure, part non-linear stage select, and honestly, part digital tabletop campaign. Every placement changes the flow of the game. Different lands unlock different quests, events, characters, and difficulty levels depending on where and when they're placed, making each playthrough feel surprisingly personal and unpredictable. That sense of experimentation gives Legend of Mana a freedom that very few JRPGs had at the time. One player's adventure can look completely different from another's. And paired with the game's gorgeous hand-painted art style, charming soundtrack, and free-flowing combat, it creates an experience that still feels remarkably unique decades later. It's weird, experimental, occasionally confusing. But that creativity is exactly why so many fans still love it today. Number 1. Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. These chronicles are sprawling and seemingly endless. Building off the foundation laid by Xenoblade Chronicles X took the series in a much more ambitious direction, and for many fans, it became one of the most unforgettable RPGs Nintendo ever published. Originally trapped on the Wii U, the game slowly gained a near-mythical reputation over the years, partly because so few players actually got the chance to experience it. And honestly, it deserved better. This is a massive sci-fi RPG that feels enormous in both scale and ambition. Alongside The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, it stands as one of the biggest and most daring Nintendo-published games of the Wii and Wii U era. The world design alone is staggering. Towering alien landscapes stretch endlessly into the distance, filled with huge vertical environments that encourage constant exploration. Every region feels distinct, dangerous, and genuinely mysterious in a way few open-world games manage to capture. And then there are the skells. These customizable mech suits were definitely divisive among fans, but they also completely changed the scale of the game. One moment you're carefully exploring on foot, and the next you're piloting a giant mech across enormous alien continents or soaring through the sky. It gives the game an incredible sense of progression. Beyond exploration, Xenoblade Chronicles X is packed with side quests, faction systems, character interactions, and a massive campaign that constantly pushes players toward discovering something new. There's always another objective. Another hidden area. Another bizarre creature lurking somewhere off in the distance. It's messy at times. Overwhelming even. But that ambition is exactly what makes it so memorable. Few JRPGs have ever felt this large, this free, or this willing to let players completely lose themselves in an alien world.
Okay, so that's it for today. So if you enjoyed it, punch the like button, comment down below, subscribe to the news channel for my Twitter and Instagram links down below. As always, of course, I'll put my 2 buddies first in the description for YouTube needs, tag titles, thumbnails, all that good stuff. So if you need help with, especially like I did, first in the description, download it today. Trust me, you'll wonder how you ever got on without it. And of course, our partner channels, and hit down below, hit that join button to put myself and the channel, and of course get a huge range of benefits. But greatly appreciated. But of course, you never have to. But if you don't, you have to subscribe and watch the next video, or something might follow you home. You never know, stuff happens. Okay, thank you very much. I'll see you all again very soon.